Let's play a game of Would You Rather. Suppose you are ready to sit down in your favorite knitting nest and you pick up your project now. Would you rather go hunting through a multi-page mess of circles and arrows and notations, or pick up one page and have all the information you need to carry on from exactly where you were without looking at your pattern at all? I thought so. Guess what? I'm going to teach you how to blueprint your pattern so that you can work from a single page and see the whole piece you're working on with only the information that you need for your size and your modifications. Ready to play? Meet me in the lounge and we'll talk about this. As always, I'm Nicole Knits from Nicole Knits Knows Knitting, and today we are talking about how we are going to take all of these lovely instructions, extract the information that's relevant to you, and notate up a blueprint of those instructions that you can look at a glance and find out what your next step is without having to refocus every time on the right spot, on the right page, on the right line, on the right parentheses, on the right number. You know what I'm talking about. Especially these days with all these fantastic size inclusive patterns, and I am 100% for size inclusivity, but sometimes that means there can be 15 or more sizes in a pattern and 15 or more different numbers as part of each set of instructions line by line in your pattern, and you need to go and find yours. We'll talk more about that in a minute. I learned this technique of putting all the information onto a single page from Patty Lyons, because I learned a lot of my stuff from Patty Lyons. She calls it pattern mapping. I call it blueprinting because to me, it looks a little bit more like a blueprint than a map. This is a visual representation of the pattern piece that you are currently knitting on. You can put as much or as little information on here as you want, but there's some necessary stuff that you need to know. I will go over all of the details when we go to the hand cam and I show you exactly how to break down your pattern and notate it up onto a graphic like this. This lovely sweater that I'm wearing, which is a modified Patty Lyons design called Gramercy Park, was the first time that I did a pattern blueprint like this, and I instantly fell in love with it. I've done dozens of them since then, and when I don't do it, I'm always sad and regretful. All right, let's get down to it. What are you going to need? Your pattern, a hand-drawn or printed graphic of the piece that you're working on. And yes, this is a flat knit piece, but I'm also going to show you how to handle in the round projects as well, and top downs and bottom ups. You're going to need a highlighter. You're going to need a pen. You might want some sticky notes to mark your pattern. And you're going to need a cup of tea, cup of coffee, or if you're me, gin. Let's go to the hand cam and get started.
The first thing I want to do is show you some examples of blueprints that I have done in the past. This is a Patty Lyons design that I did called Costa Maya. This is my back from that one. This was another pullover sweater that I mapped out here. I don't think I actually have gotten around to knitting this one, but when I'm ready to knit it, here it is, ready to go. And this one was a Tin Can Knits pattern. We're going to talk more about them in a minute, called Juniper. And this I'll come to in a bit because you can see how I just very roughly sketched out the shape of the sweater here, put my notations on it, but then I also put the particular charts that I was going to need to use and the key for the cables, and it's all on one page. I was able to knit practically the entire sweater just from this one page, but we'll come back to that in a minute. So what I want to do with you today is we're going to do a couple of examples. I'm going to start with showing you how a simple flat knit piece. So when I say flat, I mean, sorry, this camera just moves around willy-nilly as it chooses to. Yeesh. Okay. I mean patterns that are knit in pieces and sewn together. Remember the days when we used to knit patterns in pieces and sew them together? Well, sometimes I still do this. It's actually a really good way to build a sweater. If you're one of those people who is on side with that, give me a thumbs up and let me know. Anyway, so I'm going to show you how to do separate pieces, like a front, a back, a sleeve. You can do the front and back on one piece. We'll talk about that too. And then I'm going to show you how a top-down yoke sweater would work as well. So here we have this front, and my camera's crooked. Okay, there we go. Sorry. So profesh, eh? And let's just pretend that we're looking at a pattern. We're going to look at an actual pattern in a minute. But for right now, we're just going to pretend. And let's say I've looked at my pattern, and my pattern says I'm going to be working with 4mm needles. And maybe I'm going to do ribbing in 3.5mm needles. At some point, I determined what my gauge is going to be, and so I like to write that up here somewhere. So let's say my gauge will be, let's say 5 stitches to per inch. Okay, and you might also want row gauge. It depends on what you're doing. But at least have that in mind, because you can always double check some math if you need to make any modifications to the shaping in your pattern. So these are the needle sizes. You can write down here, these are your needle sizes, if that helps you keep track of your notations. I end up with a lot of notations on my page. Sometimes when I go back, I'm like, what was that? Oh yeah. You might also want to write down what size you're making. So say this pattern had 10 sizes and you've chosen to knit size 5. That's just a really quick way to have that right in front of you so that if you do have to go back and refer to the pages themselves, you know which notation you're looking for, which specific instructions you're looking for a size 5. Okay, so let's say now you've looked at your instructions and they say for the front for size 5, you are going to cast on, and I just use CO for cast on, let's make it easy, 100 stitches. So I put that right down here. This would be a bottom up sweater. If you were doing a top down flat front piece, which you probably wouldn't be, but if you were, you would want to spin this around, and you would, instead of have front, you'd rewrite it front, and this would be your starting point down here. You'll see that when we go to do the yoke from the neck down how that works and looks different. So any piece you're going to be working from the top down, you want to turn the page around before you start writing on it. So it's really clear that you're starting at the bottom and working your way that way. Okay. What'd we do? We cast on 100 stitches. Now, say there's ribbing at the bottom of this sweater. So I might just, make a few rib-like marks down here and make a note, 1 by 1 rib for, say that's 1.5 inches, something like that. Am I writing off the side of the page? I am. I can't see what I'm doing. I usually leave myself more room. Okay, so for 1.5 inches, 1 by 1 rib for 1.5 inches. And then here, you can see there's a shaping point. So then you're going to knit straight, and your pattern may tell you X number of rows. So let's say the pattern says 10 rows from there to there after you finished the ribbing. The other notation you'll want to make here is after you do the ribbing. So you're going to cast on 100 stitches with the 3.5 millimeter needles. This is important. And then, as often happens when you're done with the ribbing, you are going to change to larger needle. Okay? So you made that notation for yourself. Then you're going to knit 10 rows, and then you've got some decreases here. For decreases, I like to make marks, just little slash marks like this. Decrease, decrease. And that indicates to me that I'm going to do a right-leaning, sorry, I know I'm left-handed and my hand keeps getting in the way, doesn't it? I'm going to do a right-leaning decrease. And you can make a notation like this. We're going to do those right-leaning decreases every 6 rows. Okay, so it would be the same on the other side. It's up to you if you also want to mark them on this side, knowing that you're going to be doing a balanced pattern. Sometimes I only put it on one side, sometimes I put it on both. So that gets us up to the waist. Now, if there is a particular number of stitches that you want to double check that you've reached when you got here, so we started with 100, we decreased 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So by the time we got to the waist, we should have 92. You'll double check that with your pattern. And this is where you can stop and do a stitch count check right there. Then, say again, you're going to knit 10 rows with no shaping from there to there. And then you're going to do maybe your pattern says to do a few increases. For increases, I make little pluses here. And say these are again every 6 rows. Then when we get up to the underarm, let's say this is bind off 5. And then again, we're doing some decreases here. Every other row, maybe. That's pretty common for there. And then maybe from here to where the neckline starts, this point to this point is maybe 5 rows. You're gonna get all this information off your pattern, remember? I'm just making this up as I go along. And then here there's going to be some decreases coming in here. This would be bind off however many it says for the neck, maybe 20. You're going to be doing some decreases up this way, and it may tell you to do those decreases and then knit until this from here is a particular depth, except usually they come right down to the armhole depth, right? And they tell you to knit until your armhole depth is a particular number. So I probably would put that arrow maybe over here instead, just to get it out of the way and make it easier to see, there to there, and say that's 8.5 inches. See where I'm getting at? And then here you might do bind off 3, 3, and 3, something like that. Okay, getting the gist of the idea? With that on your page, that is everything that you need, from the cast on, the needles, the information about the size you're doing, how much ribbing you're going to do, how many rows you're going to knit here, your increases every 6 rows, knit some more rows, or sorry, decreases every 6 rows, knit some more rows, increases every 6 rows, bind off, decrease, 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 knit 5 rows, bind off, start working decreases here. This is knit straight, bind offs up here. It's all here. This is it. This is everything you need to know. You can work your whole front just from this, never having to, again, go back to all those pattern pages and rifle through them and look for the information and possibly look at the wrong number or having circled the wrong number, etc., etc. Okay? Pretty cool, right? Now, fair enough. Okay, Nicole, that was relatively easy to do this single page or a flat single piece. What if I'm working in the round? What if I have like 3 dimensions that I'm dealing with? How do I handle that this way? Okay, well, I'm glad you asked. Let me show you. We are going to take a look at a tin can knits pattern called the Flax sweater. You may be familiar with the Flax sweater. It's an extremely popular sweater. I think if you go into Ravelry and you set the search filters to adults pullover or child's pullover or any pullover, quite frankly, the Flax, there's a couple of different versions of the Flax sweater. They're going to show up in the top row every single time. Very popular, great free pattern. Highly recommend Tin Can Knits. We're going to talk about this, the app, a little bit later, because Tin Can Knits has developed an app that does for you automatically what we're having to do manually here before you start knitting. Okay, that is very cool. So we'll come to that in a bit. So the Flax sweater is, if we look at this, and I've chosen this one because it is a free pattern, so I'm not feeling antsy about giving away somebody's pattern for free here. Construction. This is what we want to know right here. This sweater is worked seamlessly in the round, top down. So we know that's what we're dealing with. Now, Tin Can Knits, because they're a genius, give you these little breakdowns of exactly how this sweater is going to come together. So you have the option of doing the ribbed collar first and then starting to build out the yoke. When the yoke is finished, it gets folded in half and you work the body, you put the sleeve stitches on hold, and then in the end you come back and you pick up the sleeve stitches and you work down that way. That's the whole shebang here. All top-down sweaters are going to be similar to this with some variations. So hopefully this will give you an idea. What I have done is I went into Paint on my computer and I just created this rectangle with an oval in the middle and these radiating lines going out to the side and these little bars right here, and you'll understand why I did all that in a minute. With tin can knits, you can see what you need. The diagram that you need is actually right here. So you can just freehand. You don't have to have computer skills like I do. You could just freehand yourself a big rectangle, draw a rough oval in the middle, draw out these lines, use a ruler if you need to make things straight. You can do it. You don't need to do anything fancy. I often will snatch the schematic using my computer, using a screenshot. I'll scoop the schematic from the pattern itself and then take it into a photo editing program and kind of clean it up or blow it up and then print it out on the page. I usually print it out. This one is bigger than I would usually have because I like to have more room around the outside edge to make some extra notes. But for clarity, this is a good size. And if you're not using a pattern that comes with a schematic like this, that shows you what all the pieces are, or if it's one piece and all the measurements, don't knit that pattern. That's all I'm going to say. Don't do it. Okay. So what we're going to do right now is a little real time. How do we go about getting the information off of the pattern onto our blueprint? So the first thing you need to do is you need to go through your pattern with your marker and mark off all of your information. This is something you should always do with your patterns anyway, but this process of taking this information and putting it on your blueprint is going to go a lot faster if you just go ahead and do this. So the first thing you need to figure out is which size you are doing, as you always would, right? So I decided, let's say for fun, because it's about in the middle, I'm going to do the large. And that I can tell is in the dark font, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's the sixth size in the dark font. So when I go to my pattern, every time I see all these huge long series of numbers, I'm going to count starting with the dark ones, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and mark it off with my highlighter. Go through the whole pattern and do that. Alrighty, then we're going to take the information from here and put it here. Like I said, in Flax, they give you the option of either starting by knitting the ribbing for the collar first and then beginning to work the sweater. No, do not do this. I know you want to, so you don't have to come back and do the neckline finishing later. I'm telling you right now, do not do this.
Do not start your sweater with the neckline finishing. There are a few exceptions to this rule where I would say that it's okay to do it. This is not one of them, especially when it's just like an inch or an inch and a half of ribbing. No, you are not getting enough structure in that neckline by doing the ribbing and then immediately working into the sweater. You need to do that cast on, come back later, pick up those stitches around the neckline, and then do your ribbing. That is going to give your neck finishing way more structure. It's going to last longer. It's going to wear better. It's going to sit better. Your garment's going to hang better. Trust me, I'm not kidding. Don't do it. All right, go ahead if you feel like you need to, but I'm just going to sit here and think in my mind, I told you so. Back to the hand cam.
All right, where were we before I so rudely interrupted myself? Okay, using a smaller needles. So what size needles did they ask for? We got 4 millimeter and 5 millimeter. 4 millimeter and 5 millimeter, and we're doing size large, which is number 6 on the pattern. Doesn't hurt to have that. Okay, so using 4 millimeter cast on, what's this say, 90 stitches. Okay, and then then we're going to jump right to, after casting on, switch to larger needles. And so this very first row is going to be with the 5 millimeter. Change to 5. Yeah, I put 5 twice, whatever. Okay, knit a single round. Knit 1 round. Then proceed to the neckline increase. Okay, so our first one is the neckline increase. So we are going to increase 34 stitches. Let's see, cast on 90. Actually, this should be here. Knit 1 round, increase 34. So you can do that math. That's a whole other lesson, how to do the math. And then you have 124. Okay. Then we're going to jump right to the yoke. Marker setup. So let's pretend we are, I think we are here. I think this is beginning of round, but we'll find that out in a minute. So we're going to knit 2. So right here is knit 2, purl 14, knit 2, PM. So you're going to place a marker. PM is for place marker. Going to knit 44 and then place a marker. And then we're repeating the whole thing again. So knit 2, purl 14, knit 2, and then here, place marker. You can put these notations, you can put this down here to make it easier. And then knit 44 and place a marker. So this is definitely beginning of round right there. See where I'm getting at? This is purl 14 because back in these instructions, this strip down the center of the sleeve in the flax is garter stitch. So it's going to be purl and then knit alternating rounds, just this part. The whole rest of this sweater is knit every round, but every second round you're going to purl those 14 stitches to make that little strip that goes down the center of the sleeve right there. That's the one cute little detail of the flax sweater. Okay, clear as mud, that's how you're going to start. Now, you're starting to see there's a lot of information here. You may find that you have to do this more than once, and I probably shouldn't be doing it in a pen. I should probably be doing it in pencil so I can erase it and rewrite it and kind of clean it up and make it easier for me to follow. Then we're going to get into doing the setting up to do the increases. And the increase instructions are here on the pattern. And I think it's work rounds 1. So there's an increase round and there's a don't increase round. Work rounds 1 to 2 a total of 20 times. So there's a couple of ways you could do this. You could do this in the way that I showed you with these, or actually these are increases, so they're going to be little pluses. So you could actually put them all in, but since this is 20 times, you could just put here every second round times 20, like that. And that would tell you what you're doing. But you're getting the idea. See how this is building out? So this is a sleeve. This is, say, the back. This is a sleeve. And this is the front. Right? That's how this is building out. So you're building out the back. You're building out the front. You're building out the sleeves. And then when the yoke is complete, let's go back to this diagram, the whole thing gets folded over and then you start working the body. So I'm not going to put every last little bit of information on here. I just want you to get the sense of how this works. If you are doing this and you get stuck, just email me, let me know what you're doing. Take a screenshot or a snapshot of what you're working on and maybe a little slice, or tell me where you're getting stuck with how to add these instructions, and I'll help you out the best I can. Okay, so that's the yoke. When you get to the body, what you can do is, it depends on how much detail there is in the body. This is just a straight up and down body. So really, it wouldn't bother me too much to just sketch out, the top of the sweater like this. And then after I've joined, and I probably need to cast on X number for the underarms, that kind of thing. And now I'm working the body in the round. So I want to make a note of how many stitches I'm going to have there. Here it looks like 188. I'm working over 188 stitches on the body. And I'm just going to knit for 16 inches from the underarm. So that's a piece of cake, right? 16 inches. And then again, at the bottom, there's going to be, how much ribbing? Change to smaller needles. So make a note right here. Change to smaller needles. And then one by one rib. And again, this is going to be whatever kind of rib the pattern tells you to do. That's what you're going to write here for 2 inches. And then bind off. If there's a particular kind of bind off they want you to use, make sure you make a note. So this says bind off loosely. We'll bind off loosely. It might say bind off in pattern. It might say bind off with a particular bind off. You'll want to make that note here too. Getting the idea? And then for sleeveys, the sleeveys, you're going to be working, picking up here and knitting down that way. So if it makes it easier for you, you might want to draw yourself a sleevey this way. And you're going to pick up, let's see, pick up 58 stitches, and then there's a bit of setup. There's a bit more information on there. I'm not going to put it on here right now. And then we've got 68 until you have 68 stitches. And then where's the rest of the sleeveys? Here's the sleeveys. Let's say we want to do 3/4 sleeveys. You're going to work 5 rounds in pattern. So knit 5 rounds, except remembering that you're continuing that garter stitch rib. So if you actually draw it here, it's like, oh yeah, that's right. I'm going to purl 14 every second round as I work down the sleeve. And then work, then there's a decrease round. So there's going to be a decrease on that side of the sleeve. And now those decreases are actually happening on the underside of the sleeve at the center. So if you want to, you can redraw the top. This is the top of the sleeve. You can redraw the bottom of the sleeve. This is where there would be a seam if you weren't doing this in the round. You're knitting that way. And you can mark the decreases as you go on the sleeve. And then you've got your ribbing, and again, smaller, whoops, I'm doing it again, sorry, needles. Or, you know, alternatively, you can just put 4 millimeter there. If that's enough to remind you, you will figure out what works for you. And one by one, rib for 2 inches. Okay, clear as mud. It's really kind of fun. And you know, it's really going to help you understand your pattern better. It's going to force you to read through the whole pattern before you start. You're going to pick up any little odd bits of information that might be in there, particular points about certain parts of the pattern that you make sure you don't want to miss. Write them down here. You can write them down, you know, really big somewhere. Make a note for yourself. Don't forget garter strip, right? So it's right there. So if you leave this and come back, you won't forget to carry on that garter strip down the top of the shoulder that continues down onto the sleeve. And like I showed you on that other pattern here, if there are any particular charts that you're using, like on this pattern, I noted which charts I'm using and where they're going as I work up this body or down the body if you want. And you're able to kind of cut out small charts and keys, stitch keys, and little bits of stitch instructions. I like this. I like cutting and taping or cutting and pasting. Get out your glue stick. Get as much of it as you can onto one page. I'm super happy if I can have everything onto one page, especially if it's a project that I'm going to be picking up and taking with me somewhere. I find it super useful. Okay, getting the gist? I hope you're getting the idea and this is making sense. Start with a simple pattern. Even start with one that you're never going to knit. Just pick a simple free pattern off of Ravelry and practice doing this. Practice taking the information out of the pattern itself and creating yourself a blueprint. I mean, you saw I just hand drew this. I didn't do anything fancy. If you really feel like you can't draw, you can snatch the schematics off of patterns. Like I said before, you can even use your camera phone, your phone camera and take a picture and print it out that way. I mean, there's all kinds of ways you can do this. If you don't have your own photocopy machine, find somebody who does, find a friend, go down the hall, knock on someone's door, can I borrow your photocopier for a minute, blow things up, make lots of copies, cut them out, cut and paste. And when you've got everything on one page, off you go.
So what do you think? How are you feeling about that? I know it's a bit overwhelming at first. There's a lot going on, but trust me, this is a really, really good brain exercise for you. And it's going to make it much more likely that you are going to breeze through knitting that project because you've already distilled it by writing it down. Remember the days when you were back in school and how, you could sit and listen to a teacher or prof lecture, but if you actually sat and took handwritten notes, I'm pretty sure there are studies about this, that if you sat and took handwritten notes while you were listening to them, you absorbed the information much better. Same idea here. Not only is this going to make it easier for you to knit just by carrying this one sheet around with you instead of 6 double-sided pages or 12 single-sided pages and having to rifle through them wherever you are or in the living room and dropping things on the floor and spilling coffee on it. You've only got to deal with one page. You might want to make a quick copy of it just to make sure you have an extra. Never hurts. But I absolutely love having these blueprints to knit from instead of having to look at the full pattern every time I pick up my knitting. Are you with me? Are you going to try it? Let me know down in the comments what you think. Tell me if it's too much or if you're game to give it a go. Ask questions. I know I didn't cover everything. There isn't enough time. This would have to be like a 2-hour long video and nobody wants to watch that. Yeah, shut up, Oscar. Now that I've shown you all that, there is an easier way, believe it or not. Tin Can Knits, the brilliant designers behind the Flax sweater and the Juniper sweater and Love Note and all those other fantastic sweaters, have created an app. The app symbol looks like this. You pick the pattern you want to do. You pick the size you're going to make, and this app will walk you through step by step, line by line, the entire pattern only for the parameters that you've given it. You don't get to see it all visually the way you do with the blueprint, but it does take away that issue of having to find your information out of a line of 15 sizes on a pattern. It's really, really cool. It's free. Just download it. Take a look at it. I'm strongly considering doing an entire video on how to use this app, but check it out. It's really cool. Another option that I know a lot of you already use is an app called Knit Companion. And I used to use Knit Companion years ago, and it's very similar in that you can load your whole PDF pattern into it. You can make notations. You can follow charts line by line, and you can mark them off. You can do, it's got lots of fantastic features to organize your knitting projects and make them a little easier for you to handle. It does require you to have a bit more of a technology bent, perhaps, than doing this, write it down yourself blueprint method, or even using the Tin Can Knits app. Both of these are a little less techy, but if you're a techie-minded person and you really like to do things online and on your devices, on your tablet and your phone, rather than dealing with paper, then Knit Companion will be for you. All right, then. This is the part where I say, if you had a good time, you learned something, please give me that thumbs up. And if you're not already a subscriber, please subscribe if you can. And if you want to see more, maybe you don't. I don't know. Also, before you do any of this, what should you be doing first? You should be swatching. Please go have a look at my video on how to knit an honest swatch. And between your swatch and your blueprinted pattern, you are going to keep those needles clicking like clockwork for the rest of your knitting life. Have a great week. Oscar says goodbye, and I say goodbye, and we'll see you next week.